Good evening, Erev Tov. Sehr geehrte Frau Helga Büdenbender, sehr geehrte Frau Birgitta Zypris, sehr geehrter Herr Jürgen Dietrich, dear Mr. Han Palagan, dear Dr. Tamar Ohr, liebe Dr. Irena Bendavid-Aur, Irena יקרה und Dr. שרון לבנה, שרון, תודה לכן על הזכות לעבוד איתכן. Es war eine sehr schöne Gelegenheit, opportunity to work with you in the recent 5 years. So, dear colleagues and friends of the Baeck Institute of Jerusalem, I'm delighted indeed being here with you this evening after a long time of being away in absence, meeting distinguished colleagues and close friends of the Institute, and mine too, for a nice long day. And if you already the impressions, I already lost my voice because of, exchange, debates, talking, exciting moments with colleagues here and friends. So we appreciate so much your attendance this evening, as much as we know to appreciate your support and contribution to our community, especially during the previous 2 years, which were extremely difficult and challenging indeed. Now, I was invited. You see the paradox, right? I'm kind of a guest at my own home. I was invited this evening to carry a short lecture to serve for the opening of the conference Back Home, which is, a brilliant title, asking about homecoming. While engaging, of course, the German Jewish traditions, we like those plural forms, historical, cultural, in their historical and cultural, philosophical, political and theological contexts. The conference program beginning tomorrow, the real one, is rich, engage different aspects of that very question. What is the meaning of being at home? My own contribution this evening is a minor one, asking about the condition of homecoming, its tensions and even its contradictions, its impossibilities and failures. Alongside, however, its necessities and futurities. We, scholars of German studies, like dialectics as such. Right? Impossible and therefore necessary. As they were, however, reflected in German Jewish writings, mainly during the 1930s and 1940s. So it's not without this gravidity of German Jewish writing during the periods of refuge. We ask about the question of being at home while acknowledging the experience of migration and of refuge. So what is the meaning of being at home? Zu Hause zu sein, להיות בבית. For what kind of experience does this term stand for? And why it's often associated, with acts of return, with homecoming, with a journey back, Wiederkehr. Homecoming, we will argue, the very act of return, Wiederkehr, is what home is. I'm using the presentation if my voice is broken, so you can follow the sentences which are the key sentences. So we all seem to share, one may assume, this experience of being at home, especially after a long period of absence. I can tell, when we speak of home, we speak of familiarity, of belonging. Being at home is a meaningful experience, even more. It is the experience that creates what meaning is all about. An end, a solution, a telos, a conclusion, moving towards of what being is all about. And yet, as much as this experience of homecoming is evident, as far as we may agree about being at home as a mode of belonging, there is also something odd, queer, uncanny. We say it in German, we learn it from German, unheimlich, that might emerge within it, in that very mode of being at home. The experience of Fremdsein, Zarut, foreignness, a mode of not yet or not anymore belonging. A rapture, a distance, intervene in those moments of return. We recall those moments coming after a long journey, longing for comfort at home, but the place we once knew seems now so different, unfamiliar, alienated. One feels himself, herself, stranger at home. This strange, of course, Freudian experience, so here they are, the German Jewish ghost, right? This strange Freudian experience at home, the experience of Unheimlichkeit, of being foreign at your own house, hints, however, to that very nature, the very essence of what home is. Was heißt zu Hause zu sein. Also without that, we don't understand what is the meaning of being at home. So not the experience of belonging alone. It is a German sentence. Not the experience of belonging alone, but also a sense of non-belonging. The unfamiliar, the unknown, the new constitutes the experience of homecoming. We recall the tale of homecoming, containing its own failures. It is the tale of Odysseus, of course, a Greek warlord who returned finally home to Ithaca after a long journey and so many years of absence. A war hero, a war criminal, a man of great glory, destroyer of cities. The travel of the Greek warlord reads as an epic poem of homecoming. Yes, as much as it stands as a tale of arrival, of homesickness, nostalgia. The Odyssey actually tells much more about detours, obstacles, paths untaken, disasters, loss, and failures of arrival. We read it. Its legacy, if there is something like that what Odysseus himself stands for, is a story of impossible return. What the tale of Odysseus tells us is not, if at all, about homecoming in a sense of closure, a solution, an happy end. It rather tells about a journey that finds no end, referring to states of disorientation, refuge, and getting lost. These two, we argue, belong to the nature of what home is. We don't want to deny it. Reading the Odyssey as a lament of homecoming is something we cannot deny. Not today, not while gathering in Jerusalem, as Jews and Arabs, our people, are still facing refuge and danger, lamenting loss and destructions of hosts. The Odyssey serves us as a point of departure. It tells on Odysseus landing in Ithaca, his homeland. We remember, Odysseus is brought home at night while sleeping, unaware of his own arrival, as if death came upon him. However, in the morning, while awaking, after so long an absence, he failed to recognize his native land. Ithaca indeed cast a mist upon it. Homesick and grieving, as a foreign in his own land, disorientated, he dragged himself, along the shore of a sounding sea, and looking at his native land, lamenting, where am I? And who are those people, violent and cruel? Or are they kind to strangers, folks we fear, the gods? Where can I carry all my treasure, and where can I go wandering? If we were to ask about homecoming, while arguing about loss and failures of return, we were first to ask about those sounds, those voices of lament, the crying of homecomer. For those sounds are voices of our mother tongues, the cry of all mothers, lamenting loss and refuge of all, the fall of the cities. Odysseus, a man who left home and went so far on the path of war, how could he ever find a proper arrival? Yes, he will enter his house finally, but for revenge. Dressed as a stranger to kill so many. He will join his son and will greet his wife. But after a while, Odysseus will have to leave once more. One may ask, what kind of reading is this I'm offering this evening? Reading the Odyssey as a tale of an exile? Reading the Greek tale as a journey of no return? Is it a diasporic reading? Are we offering a German or a German-Jewish reading of the Greek epic poem? Of course. But even if this were the case, if we were not the first to suggest it. German-Jewish readings and reception of the Odyssey may attest at that direction. We recall, for example, the remarks by Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer on Odysseus' journey, included in the first excursus in their book on the dialectic of enlightenment, itself a masterpiece of German Jewish writing during the 1940s, written while the authors themselves were in refuge from Nazi Germany. A brilliant book, which, however, we all know, was not free of certain failures and frightful references, although self-ironic, regarding the Jewish condition. This is something almost typical to German Jewish writing, right? This self-ironic, self-critical, almost destructive way of engaging themselves. In that very chapter, Adorno and Horkheimer discussed the episode of Odysseus' encounter with the sirens, as if Odysseus' method is a way of listening or not hearing to their singing, yet from a distance, saving himself from their power, the feminine one, while binding himself to the mass of the ship was, according to this reading, a prefiguration of a modern subjectivity, remote, self-controlled subject. Odysseus stands, however, in Adorno's and Horkheimer's reading, not alone as a sailor, an explorer of highlands, a warlord, a storyteller of great skills, but also, we know, he stood for them as a Jew. Isolated, anonymous subject, as they wrote, just like his God. Pride and remote, who nevertheless cannot keep a secret. They almost refer to a kind of an Abraham, but rather speaks too much, aloud, like immersion in an Oriental bazaar. Amazing. We cannot deal, however, with those ambiguous remarks by Adorno and Horkheimer. Their portrait of Odysseus, fascinating and odd as it may be, bright and wrong as it may sound, signifies an unexpected association between the Odyssey and the Jewish or the German Jewish experience. For others, such as Erich Auerbach, the comparison, so to say, between the Jewish tale of wandering and the Greek poem of homecoming was valuable too, although his conclusions were very different. Auerbach, like Adorno and Horkheimer, had to escape Nazi Germany. It's very important, right? Where and when they wrote about Odysseus as a non-Jew. And found his refuge, Auerbach, during the 1940s in Istanbul. It's also very interesting. Where he wrote his famous book, Mimesis. In the opening chapter of this marvelous book, Odysseus emerges in another episode of Homecoming, in the scene where the Greek traveler, upon his returning home, was recognized by the old nurse, again a feminine figure, as she was washing his feet, following the custom of hospitality. Once he touched the scar of Odysseus' foot, which he bears since childhood, she immediately knew her house lord. The episode, as Erich Auerbach tells it, is very moving and frightening too. As Odysseus was still hiding his identity upon his arrival home, so he was sitting at home as a stranger, pretending to be a beggar in his own house, a stranger, a guest, while planning a massacre. Against this Greek epic of homecoming, Auerbach offers to read the Hebrew Bible, the tale of Abraham, who went on a different journey following the call of his God to take his son, his beloved one, the only one, Isaac, to be sacrificed. If Odysseus were to make his way back home on the long path of return, Abraham were to go in the opposite direction, leaving his house, as he did before, departing his homeland once more. If Odysseus, to follow Emmanuel Levinas, stands indeed for homecoming, for a closure, although in my own reading, my thesis nevertheless attempts to challenge, but you know, Levinas. Namely, for the being of a subject, according to Levinas, a being, what Odysseus stands for, a being that returned to himself, as Odysseus considered as the greatest story about the creation of the self, the path of homecoming. Abraham, according to Levinas, embodies the opposite movement, the compulsion of wandering, a travel which is not homecoming. It's not a closure, a return of self to itself, but rather a movement towards the other, of course, Levinas, towards the unknown, the unfamiliar. Abraham, to follow Levinas' reading, was doomed or blessed to a journey without return. So Abraham, perhaps more than other biblical figure, stands for that argument in the history of philosophy. For Kant, who refers to Abraham in a footnote in his essay Streit der Fakultäten, while arguing against his obedience, Abraham, according to Kant, should not have followed the demonic call of his heart, of his God he heard to sacrifice his son. Another critical remark is found in Hegel, who argues about Abraham as a wandering Jew, isolated, alienated subject, a foreign among the peoples, who have no home to return to. And more crucial, perhaps, is Kierkegaard's remarks in Fear and Trembling, presenting Abraham's journey as an awful, silent travel, a secret that holds the act of belief. And Levinas, here again, already mentioned, reacting in Kierkegaard, attempt to save Abraham from that demonic silence, arguing about him, about his dialogical skills, and his ethical commitment to, as presented in detail, of Sodom and Gomorrah. So Abraham knew how to talk, right? Not to be silent. And finally, Derrida's essay on the gift of death, when the author, Derrida, returns to justify Abraham's silent journey on his way of keeping a secret as an act of responsibility towards the absolute other. Now, all of those readings or writings or acts of writings questioning the being of being Jewish is associated with the experience of not being at home. So the Jewish cannot tell us about homecoming. We know this argument very well. The claim regarding the so-called Jewish homelessness. We know its assumptions, partially false ones, as if the Jews were destined to exile from being itself. And it's not our task, not this evening, to challenge this thesis, or as much as we have no intention to claim for it, no any urgent need to argue against it. We're allowed to move through, even to move beyond this too simple, binary, right, bipolaric pattern of the question, what is a Jewish homecoming? And there is no need, perhaps, for an abstract, visionary thesis regarding the Jew as a homeless, while acknowledging the fact that in the Jewish traditions, Talmud and Kabbalah, Midrash, Hasidic tells, as much as the Jewish modernist literature, failures of homecoming are indeed significant. The Talmudic tale on the exile of the king's daughter, Bat HaMelech, embodying the fate of Israel among the people, Ashchina Bekerev HaGoyim, who yet failed to return home, a tale of messianic hope, or if you like, a messianic despair, if one wishes to argue so, could serve as a strong evidence of that trope in Jewish literatures. And the tale has so many versions in the mystical writings, Sefer HaBa'ir and Book of Zohar, in tales of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, but also in Walter Benjamin's writing, again written in the 1930s, while seeking a refuge from Nazi Germany, escaping his homeland forever. A short reference on that tale of the king's daughter embodying the so-called exilic condition of the Jewish people, its messianic hopes and anxieties, is found also in Hannah Arendt's brilliant essay on hidden tradition, Verborgene Tradition, written again in the 1940s in New York, again as a self-reflection, critical one, of the German Jewish diaspora. While arguing about the paria, the Jewish figuration of an exilic, banned, excluded, isolated being, Arendt refers to the Jewish figure as it has emerged in Heinrich Heine's poem Yehuda ben Halevi, a poem written again by an exilic German Jewish author of the 19th century, so Heine. So you see the connection. A poet who knew so well to tell on failures of homecoming, right? Heine's poem Deutschland eine Winterreise is a masterpiece of that trope, narrating in great funny verses the impossibilities of it. Heine's poems, however, was dedicated to Yehuda Halevi, a Jewish Arab poet from Al-Andalus of the 12th century, well known for his love poetry, but also for his lamentation on destruction of Zion, Chorban Zion, embedding a messianic call of redemption of the people of Israel. Although omitting Heine's reference to the Arabic Muslim context of Halevi's life and work, a real blind spot, when Hannah Arendt missed something, it's also bright, right? Because she's so brilliant in her readings. So her own blind spot, shining, so to say. While following Heine's wrong assumption regarding the authorship of the liturgical poem Lecha Dodi, which he himself cited Heine as a point of departure for his poem, so many things went wrong in Heine's poem and Hannah Arendt's essay. Nevertheless, she accepted the argument regarding the Jewish condition of exile, not as much as metaphysical, not as a liturgical or theological one, but rather as an historical constellation that may carry with it radical political consequences, even if they were left, historically speaking, unfulfilled or even failed. So all those cases, German Jewish, different in their nature, demand further discussion, but not tonight. My final remark on the question of homecoming, its impossibilities, it's rather a short remark on Shmuel Yosef Agnon. One cannot think, I will believe, of any other author in the history of modern Hebrew letters committed so deeply to the question of Jewish homecoming, while referring not alone to the messianic longing of return onto the cause or case of belonging, but also reflecting the failures of arrival, stays of refuge, and the exilic condition, embedded in the very essence of what the house is. Those ambiguities of homecoming, described throughout his work, presented well in the name of the author himself, Agnon, associated with the term agunot, literally the anchored, right? Female figure, a Jewish female figure, who, according to the classical rabbinical definition, was left alone as her husband went on a journey without return. In the allegorical excesses which Agnon followed, yet with a typical ironic twist, the aguna stands for the exilic female figuration of a Jewish people to the present time. Like the king's daughter I mentioned of the Talmudic tale, embodying the impossibility of return, which itself constitutes a radical hope for messianic fulfillment. In so many stories, beginning with the story Agunot itself, published in the first version of 1908, telling of the tale of Churban, broken marriage, abandoned house, loss and exile, Agnon follows in his work this very pattern, telling on the experience of getting lost, displacement, moving from one apartment to the other, anxieties of destruction, recollections of his own houses that were burned down, acknowledging perhaps the fact that one is never safe at home. Whatever his protagonist is living in Jerusalem, in Jaffa, in Berlin, or in Bad Homburg. We know that many of Agnon's houses, however, which he designed for the sake of Hebrew literature, the walls themselves tend to fall, and the floor is not straight, as if they carry with them recollections of ruins and prophecies of destruction to come. Shalom neda. Enough, tamam, enough. I argue too strongly about those impossibilities of homecoming and failures of return, about the anxieties of belonging, while asserting the exilic trope of Jewish tradition, acknowledging, although I tried not to, the diasporic condition of the question itself. When we ask, what is the meaning of being at home, once it's written in a Jewish language, Hebrew or Yiddish or German Jewish or Judeo-Arabic, we are already in exile. There is no need to deny, we live together in a very difficult time. Destruction came upon us. Houses turned into ashes in Israel. Gaza lies in ruins. Our people, Arabs and Jews, so many were killed. Many are living and still in refuge. In our houses, within the walls, we still hear the cry of lament. In those voices, in those very sounds of grief and sadness, Odysseus himself was once singing on the shore on his path of return. In this very cry, in the very same sound, one may dare to hear the yelling of a newborn, a joyful cry of being. When we ask day to day on the meaning of being at home, observing the ruins of our nearby cities, we ask in the same token about rescue and recovery, about the possibilities, no, better, about our responsibilities for life to be born again on this land, to live and to flourish. These two, may I say, belong to what we may call homecoming. Thank you very much. Thank you.